Welcome to the If You Could See Me podcast. Thank you for joining the movement. I'm your host, Erin Mahone. I'm an author, storyteller, facilitator, and mental health professional. I like to talk about big things, ask difficult questions, and challenge the ways in which we perceive ourselves, one another, and what's possible in the world. On this podcast, I speak to thinkers, makers, feelers, and folks fighting for change. You'll experience entertaining, thought-provoking conversations with people from all walks of life. I believe that mental health is health, and it goes so far beyond conversations about illness, medications, and treatment. Our mental health is essential to living our best lives, and I want to live in a world in which we talk about emotional wellness as easily and frequently as talking about the common cold. We aren't there yet, but I believe we can be. When I set out to create this thing, I had no idea what I was doing. Just that I wanted to share my story and I hoped I wasn't alone. I've discovered that so many people need to find solidarity. They need to know they aren't alone. Well, I'm here to tell you, you are not alone. We can have these difficult conversations in the light of day. We can laugh, joke, and get serious about making change. I've tried to create multiple entry points within this movement, and I hope you will take some time to check out all of our resources and consider sharing your story on our website, ifyoucouldseeme.com. There you can submit your story, find mental health resources, submit ideas or resources yourself, read the stories of other brave warriors, find out about future live events, and invite me to speak or give a workshop in your area. If you're inspired by what we're doing, I hope you'll consider helping out by visiting our Patreon page, patreon.com/ifyoucouldseeme, purchasing my book, rating and reviewing this podcast on iTunes to help people find us, or just send me a message to let me know how this project is impacting you, ways we can improve, and future podcast or blog topics. This was only an idea until amazing people like you joined me in bringing it to life. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, friends and family. This is Erin Mahone. Welcome once again to the If You Could See Me podcast. I am so excited to have the lovely Drew Wright joining me today on the show. She is the founder of the Liberal Women of Chesterfield County, which began as a project, I guess, in Chesterfield County, Virginia, and has sort of become a model for activism and organizing in communities all over the country. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
The first thing that I really did want to talk about was just sort of the last 2 years have been really big with the advent of the LWCC, and they've sort of exploded. So one of the things that I love to talk about on this podcast is how regular people can do extraordinary things. And I feel like, you're a mom and you were a writer before and you've always been an activist, but this thing has just taken on a life of its own. Can you talk a little bit about how you've created this and how it feels now to see how huge it is?
Yes, it was absolutely unexpected in my life. It was one of those, it kind of happened organically where, the 2016 presidential election occurred. And,
D-Day.
And it kind of took a lot of people by surprise, I think, the results. And it was just my gut reaction to feel like I needed others that felt the same way I did to talk to and kind of connect and come together. So I certainly didn't expect from that, flash forward almost 2 years now, and we've got, thousands of members We're making international headlines.
Right.
And all of these huge things. And we're really actually making a difference, I think, in our community in multiple ways. And, none of that was planned per se when LWCC started. It was more, I wanted to have like-minded folks that could sit around a table and kind of commiserate, but also have conversations and get us through the Trump era, I guess you could say.
Right. So, I mean, through this process, sort of inadvertently, you have given so many women a platform and a forum to funnel the frustrations that I know I feel, and I know many, many, many other women feel in this political moment, in this social moment. How does that feel for you? And what do you feel like is the most sort of beneficial aspect of this for individual people? Everyone coming together, but I just feel like this has really empowered people in a really incredible way.
Yeah, so I think there's different types of ways it's helped folks. I mean, for some people, it's just the emotional support of knowing that they're not alone, in their beliefs and how they see the world. But for others, it has been a very much a support group where they can educate themselves about politics and how to get involved. And then they have folks that can help them take that next step, whether it's, whether it's just showing up at a meeting,
right,
or all the way to canvassing, by themselves, knocking doors, working, one lady, one story is that, I'm not going to name any names. Not that it really matters, probably, but she quit her job as a
doesn't
nurse.
matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good story, but
right.
She quit her job as a nurse and started working on one of the campaigns last year. And then now she's like a field director for Abigail Spanberger, and it's a full-time, job right now. It's about taking that next step, whether it's just being able to voice your opinion, all the way up to actively working to make change in your community.
Right.
And I've had so many people reach out to me and say that LWCC has saved their lives, just emotionally supportive. And we do tend to help each other out. And I can speak about that later, about the support I've had,
right.
personally. But so there's just so many levels. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing how one action can have such an effect on so many people coming together.
It has been really remarkable. And one of the things that I also wanted to ask you about that I have been so moved by and impressed by is the fact that, this is thousands of women, primarily women, who have come together in this Facebook, group, and then also, physically meeting in various iterations all around, all throughout the Richmond metro area. And one of the things that I have been so impressed by, just because of the nature of what social media is that for all intents and purposes, these women are incredibly supportive of one another, very positive. Certainly there are times where people disagree, but so often these groups turn into just social media groups in general turn into places for people to kind of argue and get on top of each other about things, even when they generally agree with one another. And I have just been so heartened and moved by the fact that these women genuinely support and love and care for and respect one another, even when they don't agree. And I think that's really a testament to why it's been so successful.
Yeah, and we try to keep it positive. I mean, we certainly have had some, like you said, disagreements in the past. You get a group of thousands of people. You're
exactly.
some of that. but we do really try to steer people toward the positive. I mean, we want people to be able to have conversations that may be difficult, because I know, you tend to grow. I've changed some over the last couple of years too, just trying to get other people's opinions and perspectives. But, overall, LWCC was always meant to be not just a social media forum, but meant for folks to get together and communicate and get to know each other. So we do really try to keep it positive, and that we're all ultimately working toward the same goals.
What do you feel like is, and not necessarily for LWCC, but just in general, especially within, liberal politics right now, within the Democratic Party, within, all of the expanses and the outliers. And, we're in a very interesting, extremely challenging time. What is making you hopeful? And then on the opposite side of that, what is frustrating to you? What do you think we as liberals could be doing better?
Well, I think the main thing that makes me hopeful is that there have been so many people that have kind of stood up and taken a stand against this administration, when, in the past, I think it would have been very easy to just be quiet or say, that's not my job. So that's, and it continues. So when I started LWCC, I would get a lot of questions like, yeah, everybody's excited and energetic right now, enthusiastic, but how long is that going to last? Right. It probably won't last. And here it is, we're 2 years out, and I think we've got even more energy, and more organized than we were 2 years ago. So I'm hopeful for that. I think the Democrats have learned a little bit of a lesson as far as not dividing.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that we've learned it as well as we should have. I mean, I hope we have.
Right.
But
we're still humans.
Yeah.
In the midst of all of this.
But I think we learned a little bit, okay, because Republicans are kind of known for, they're going to go and they're going to vote for the R regardless. Although I think that is changing, ironically, is flipping some because of their party has kind of been hijacked by this alt-right force. So mainly it's just a strange time in history right now. And I really think history is going to look back at this time with, a cold heart at what is going on.
Right.
And especially just with, it's just a crazy time. I mean, I think about the families getting torn apart at the border, and I can't imagine that's going to go down in the history books as a
positive moment.
Yeah, it's going to be a dark blemish on American history, I think, right now.
I totally agree. What do you feel like is missing from this movement right now? Like what voices would you like to hear more from?
Well, I think we're still struggling for all of the disenfranchised groups to kind of come together. But at the same time, I feel like there's progress with that. And maybe I'm a little naive, but I really do feel like people are speaking up for causes other than their own cause, per se, because before it was kind of like, well, who am I to speak up for LGBTQ or for African Americans or for immigrant, because I'm this white soccer mom, in the suburbs. But, women in general have a lot that we need to speak up about right now. And then when you think about I think Trump was in a way ideal villain, so to speak, for us, because it was so blatantly clear that he was attacking all the marginalized groups.
Yes.
Right. So I think it has brought us together in a way, and I hope that people will continue to kind of come out of their silos and get together and get to know each other better and kind of realize, well, like our slogan is each of our causes is all of our causes.
Right.
And that came out of the very first meeting right after the election, because like I said, he was attacking everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And especially women right now, I feel like all women should be standing up and if nothing else, being aware of your local politics and the numbers, because before last election, I think it was like 17% female in the Virginia state legislature. And that's, we're 50% of the population. So 17% is not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah, it's not a fair representation.
So actually, you really spoke to what my next question is, and that is, as a white middle-class soccer mom, as you described yourself, educated, how do you see your role and our roles as, as white middle-class educated, women in lifting up the voices of women of color and minority individuals in, within our liberal world, and obviously the larger world, but giving voice to people who have often been marginalized or stood behind the white ladies who stand up and speak for them.
Right. So I think it's always about, of course, being inviting, being welcoming, but also a couple of examples, I think, of how some people that are doing a good job trying to incorporate and invite marginalized voices to lead or co-lead. It's back when we had it was back in like the springtime, the march for the gun control.
Uh-huh.
I'm blanking on the name of it right now. I'm sorry. But we had the big march, and that we started in Richmond at a Richmond school there.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of like having it out where we are, Kelly Moss Steele coordinated that with us, with the Richmond public school system and some other groups. And so that was really, I think, a good example of kind of coming together, different groups and different geographic groups, and kind of coming together for a cause.
Right.
And then also right now we're working with on the Equal Rights Amendment, the Virginia ratified ERA. They're bringing in the Deltas sorority is helping a lot with that effort to get the ERA passed as in Virginia for the 38th state needed to ratify it. So I think it's just about respecting different voices, acknowledging that we're all here and we're all trying to, kind of have the same goals. And then, there's plenty of room and there's plenty of work to be done.
Right.
Right.
There's no shortage of work. That is for sure.
I don't think we need to fight over like the work, because there's a lot of work to be done.
Right.
But there's no easy answer either. And geographically and demographically, there are parts of Chesterfield County that are less diverse than others.
Yeah.
So we do struggle with that in some areas. And then we're trying to grow our membership in other areas.
Right.
Makes sense, and kind of just get people active.
Well, and I think that the more everyone shows up, the more partnering happens within those other communities. The outside of Chesterfield, outside of the Midlothian area, just sort of as you continue to expand out into the rest of the area, people people will sign on. I mean, there is understandably in a lot of communities, there's a lot of mistrust and questioning, what are the motivations of this, group of white middle-class ladies? Why are they doing this? And that is rightly so. And so, I think that just based on what our history is, we should always be working toward that end goal of collectively and individually giving voice to every area of what it means to be a Democrat. But at the same time, we have to also understand we meaning the middle class white ladies, of which I am one, that there is understandably and historically some questioning in certain communities about who we are and what our motivations are, and whether we're really there to help. How do you feel about the questions that are sometimes raised about performative liberalism, which I find really to be an interesting conversation happening right now?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean. I think you mean, well, why don't you tell me exactly what you mean? I'm not gonna put
Okay, sure, no problem. The idea that, this has, that our actions, our causes have become performative in nature, that, we are many, not, certainly not putting that label on you, but there are a lot of people out there who say, that we are doing and saying and being in the world for attention and performatively, as opposed to with the intention of actually doing action in the world.
I guess I would just say that, as far as LWCC, like we have so much action. I mean, there's,
right.
So I can just talk that, we put our effort where our mouth is,
Right.
And and going back to like relationships and stuff, I have to say, because I was thinking about that before, it has to do too. You've got the group level, but then you have the personal level.
Right.
Actually getting to know diverse people. Mm-hmm. My friend group has certainly looks differently now than it did 2 years ago.
Yep.
Although not as much as I would like it. I could go even farther. Like I would like even more diverse friends.
Right.
But it takes that, you need to get to know people to actually trust them. Mm-hmm. And from me too, it's a personal thing to reach out to someone and get to know them and know that they've got your back in a way, Right. So there's that. And then there's, of course, the organizational level as well. But as far as like just getting stuff done, I had to, to be honest, in the beginning, I had to kind of just, because the hardest thing for me in the beginning was actually when liberal people kind of critiqued me, like, right. What are you doing and why are you doing this? And you don't have good intentions or whatever. And to be honest, sometimes you have to just ignore that, just like you have to ignore like the Republicans, saying you shouldn't be doing this or why are you doing this? You certainly want to take it in and digest it, like, what am I doing? What are these people saying? Is it true? What level of truth? But at the same time, if you stop and thought about what everybody thought about you and what,
oh my gosh, you'd never get anything done.
Nothing would get done. So I feel like a lot of times it was just plowing ahead. And it was also, LWCC was kind of like this animal that, you were just riding with it.
Right.
It wasn't slowing down. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, it absolutely does. I think that it's really complicated, and it's hard to do this, which is why most people don't do it. But the number one issue is that sort of put your head down and just do the work, and be as mindful as and as connected to the the machine as you can be, but at the same time, you know, you just have to know that you in your core know what's right, and that you are coming at this from the best possible intentions, and that you're going to have to learn as you go.
Yeah, and learning as you go is a huge thing, because and that's a great concept for all of it, because
Right.
most of it, at least I knew hardly anything about local politics before I started this. I mean,
Right.
I've said before, you know, I don't even really like politics. But I was it connected with me, the presidency, the election, on such an emotional level, that it was no longer well, am I going to do this or not going to do this? It was just this is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and sometimes that's the best thing, is that if it just takes on a life of its own, then you don't necessarily have to decide much of anything. You just
Right.
have to kind of follow it, which is a good thing.
Yeah. It's like,
Well,
what
and you
happened?
know,
No.
the other thing that that, you know, I, as a person who, you know, puts things together, you know, does events and things like that, I just have been so inspired and excited and moved by the fact that it really just, I mean, you just had so many people saying, sign me up, you know, let me take over this, let me do that, you know. And so it wasn't, it started as you, and you are the, you know, certainly the sort of face of it, but it has, you know, become many, many, many hundreds of people who are just out, you know, with the t-shirts and banging on doors and making phone calls and,
Yeah.
you know, doing postcards and, you know, meeting in various locations, and that's just really exciting.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of our large strengths, is that it quickly became, okay, you know, myself, but then it's like, okay, we need leaders for this group and this group and this group and this
Right.
project and this project, because we're set up with the overall group, but then we have the neighborhood groups and we have some advocacy groups. And so, and I was pretty much like, okay, that's great, but we can't have these groups unless we have leaders. So somebody's got to
Right.
step up and lead them. And you're right, people would very rapidly and graciously have stepped up to lead groups. And we've had turnover and stuff, which is to be expected, but then we have new people come in and lead the groups. And so it's awesome. And and that goes back to, like, you know, bringing in marginalized voices and stuff. You know, we're always looking for new people that want to come in and kind of lead the, you know, certain groups or certain projects. But, you know, nobody gets paid. So it's all kind of like, what is your motivation level?
Yep. And that, you know, I mean, that is hard, but it's also a testament to, you know, the passion and the enthusiasm that exists, that, you know, as much as has been done over the last 2 years has gotten done with an all volunteer
Yeah,
workforce.
it's great. It's awesome. It's amazing.
It really is. So, you know, while I am a member of and a big fan of LWCC, and I have, you know, been admiring you and this group for a long time now, a long time being, you know, since the very beginning, 2 years ago. But when I really thought that I wanted to interview you was when you started talking about your recent cancer diagnosis. And the reason for that is because this particular forum is a place where we talk a lot about activism, and we talk a lot about mental health in particular, and activism around that, but also about the ways in which we face our you know, misfortune, the shitty things that happen in our lives that we don't have much control over, except for the way that we respond to them. And, you know, when you were diagnosed a few months ago, you had been dealing with an illness for your daughter that we will talk about briefly, hopefully before the end. But the way that you talked about sort of both of these things was so inspiring to me. You are so funny. You're a wonderful writer, but you are funny, and you are you know, irreverent at times, and you're very, very honest about what you're experiencing. And I'm just really curious to know, where does that come from? Did you have really funny parents? Were you just born that way? Did you have to learn this skill? I think that a lot of people want to know, how to face life's challenges with as much of a sense of humor as possible. Where does that come from for you?
No, I think I was maybe born that way. I think perhaps it got stronger. Laughter for me is a defense mechanism too. Although I think more recently it's become more than, like, it used to be a defense mechanism. I would just laugh anytime I got nervous, right, or anything. And now I think it's just more ingrained in me. I do find humor in almost anything or any situation, and I'm actually very grateful for that, especially recently, because I am going through a really hard time, especially since February. But I do still feel grateful, for a lot of things, which I'm grateful I feel grateful.
Exactly.
Oh my God, what's wrong with me? But I am, and it goes back to, some of it goes back to LWCC, and, I'm not a religious person, but it is also connected. And, here I have these major life curveballs thrown at me, and, unexpectedly. And a year before that, I had started this group of amazing women who have shown me and my family a lot of support, when I needed it. And of course, I had no way of looking forward and realizing that I would benefit so much emotionally from this group. So yeah, I totally did not answer your question.
No, I think you did.
Okay.
I think, we, in the world of, sort of more specifically of mental health, I think we talk a lot about the dangers of isolation.
Right.
And, when a person living with a mental health diagnosis in particular feels overwhelmed or gets, sort of hit with the magnitude of what they're facing, very often we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to share what is true, because there is this voice in our heads that says, you should be able to handle this all by yourself, and what's wrong with you. Right. And so I do think that it is incredibly important for people to see and hear what you just said. And that is, whether you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis or a bipolar disorder or, type 1 diabetes or whatever it is, as far as I'm concerned, mental health is health. So we talk about it in the same way that we talk about every other, potential medical condition. And that is that you can't and you are not expected to do the hard stuff of life completely by yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I have to say, when my daughter became ill, there was at first this, I had to make a decision at some point about when I was going to tell the world about that.
Right.
And I don't know that if it had been this brief, like, week or two thing, I'm not sure how open I would have been about that or not. I think about that. But hers, we are still struggling with hers, and hers, I think, is very, do want to make people aware of what she has gone through as far as that diagnosis, which is PANS, pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, which I was not very familiar with at all, before we had to live through it. So, and I do think it's, like you said, it's a physical condition. It's a blood-brain barrier. breakdown, they think, with the autoimmune
Mm-hmm.
influence in there. So I think it's really important to talk about the mental health as, a physical condition that people need help for, the doctors and research and everything else. And she was, we saw a lot of psychiatrists, and they are great for certain things, but sometimes you need other experts as well. Like my daughter needed a neurologist.
And didn't you have some difficulty with the, psychiatric and behavioral health, professionals not recognizing the symptoms of PANS and not accepting that that was in fact the diagnosis?
Yeah, so they saw it, the psychiatrist where she was at saw pandas as a certain way, like the OCD. They're like, well, she's not OCD, she's not having these tics, so and we don't think she has, that.
Right.
But she had the severe food restriction, she had depression, she had some other issues that were, and it came on very suddenly for her, which was, the February 18th is like when it happened.
Right.
And also they were pumping her full of psych drugs, and the psych drugs were not helping. They were making it worse. They were giving her horrible side effects. And I would have begged somebody for it to work. If it had worked, it'd been great.
Right.
I mean, I'm not knocking that.
But it wasn't the right treatment for her.
It wasn't the right treatment. And she stayed in the hospital for 2 months, getting worse. And then we took her up to Baltimore to Sinai Hospital to see a neurologist who diagnosed her immediately with PANS, saying, this doesn't happen, this psychiatric condition doesn't happen overnight like this.
Right, exactly.
With all the other things that, in her medical history. And so we're still kind of dealing with that because PANS and PANDAS and all of that is relatively, they've been working on it for decades, like at the National Institute of Mental Health, but there's still a lot out there that's unknown. And there are a lot. So we had doctors who varied in their opinion about their belief in it. Mm-hmm. And then we had doctors who said, well, it's real, but you treat the depression instead of the PANS. So we just had this varying degree of opinions from all these experts, quote unquote. And so, it's very confusing and frustrating and difficult, especially when your daughter is suffering.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So she is, first of all, she's doing better. Yes.
Yes. So she is doing better. She's still in homebound school. She's having IVIG treatments. We're seeking other doctors' opinions, and we're still working on it. But it's a lot better than it was back in like May when we got her out of the hospital.
Right. So, I think it is really just shocking to me to know that there is so much divergent thinking among the medical field. I work with a number of young clients who have PANS or PANDAS, and it feels like it's everywhere. I have friends whose children have it. I have, like I said, clients, acquaintances. It feels like it's so prevalent these days. Just in the last year, maybe two, it seems like it's everywhere. And it is, it's frustrating to me as a professional to hear the differing opinions. I just can't even imagine how frustrating that must have been to you and your family and to your daughter to be in that situation. Is there a community in our area of, other parents and advocates that you were able to turn to?
Yes. And there's one lady, Jessica Gavin. She is with Pray, PRAI kids.org. she, I believe, actually from LWCC, I think there's another lady, Jennifer Healy, one of our members, and she has done a lot of work trying to connect LWCC with, the Pandas organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we actually tried to get, we helped get legislation to get council, like an advisory council
Right.
here. So, and at that point I wasn't really that involved in that either, because, it hadn't affected my life that much yet. But I think I signed up maybe for their newsletter or something, because I did get the newsletter, and I was, and actually from a post on social media, I had so many folks say, it sounds like pandas. It sounds like pandas. It sounds like pants.
It's really funny, Kim, because I started writing you a message on Facebook one day saying this sounds like pans or pandas, but then I was like, she's got 8,000 people writing to her, so I'm not going to say that. But I was really glad when you did finally get that diagnosis, because it was very frustrating to see, especially on my end as a mental health advocate, and to know that we have some really wonderful mental health providers in our area. To hear that she had that experience, it was really very disheartening, and showed me that we really do have a long way to go in our medical field as we treat mental health as a medical diagnosis.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was really horrendous, the time leading up to when she went to the hospital, and then the time in the hospital. We went to, and I didn't know what was wrong, so I was panicking and going to different doctors. We went to gynecologists because I thought maybe it was hormonal,
right,
with birth control or something like that. We went to, I went to her pediatrician, and the pediatrician, and this because she was losing a lot of weight too. The pediatrician acted irritated. She's like, well, come back in a month and I'll weigh her. Please, lady, we are dying here. And so we went to psychologists, went to like 2 or 3 of those before we finally ended up in the hospital. And then we were still, I was still looking for what could it be? And so I was open to anything, I was open to what the psychiatrist said.
Of course. Whatever's going to fix my kid.
Whatever, I'm like, is it endocrinology? What is it?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the psychiatrist just kept saying, even after 2 months and nothing's helping, is that, we just think she's not telling us something. We know she's not fitting into our mold, and, she's not getting better, but we think she must just not be telling us something. And that was their answer, and it was like, even though she kept telling them and everyone else that, nothing traumatic has happened to me.
Right.
There's nothing I'm hiding from you. I am telling you everything. Somebody
and
needs
she's
to
like,
help.
She's a compliant kid. She had no history. She's a compliant kid. She had no history of, of behavioral issues or anything like that.
No, she was my child I didn't have to worry about.
Right.
And she enjoyed school and all sorts of interests. And then, she just flipped from that to being incredibly depressed and not being, there's something cognitive too in there. And I still haven't figured that out. And it's because it's still really lingering. Whereas she used to love to read novels, watch movies, play and listen to music, things like that, learn about the world. And what happened in February, and is still happening, is that she just, I don't know if it's, she can't take it in, or it's, I don't know, but she avoids all of that. She won't read. She won't listen to music. Like, we can't even have music on in the car. and it's very, very different than how it was before. And I can't figure it out. The psychiatrists can't figure it out. The neurologists can't figure it out. I mean, it's almost like I mean, this is a very broad way to say it, but it's almost like overnight she turned autistic, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I still feel like there's something we're missing. And that's one of the scary things about PANS too, is that you can't always put your hands on what it is that's causing it.
Right.
You know, I mean, and the neurologist did say that there are, they're discovering new antibodies every year. Mm-hmm. So that he said, I would treat her based on her clinical diagnosis, regardless of what the blood work came back as, because of the diagnosis. Right. And he said there might be an antibody that we haven't discovered yet, that's causing this. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Well, I mean, all that we can do is be, hopeful and pray for, future discoveries, and that, these experiences within our communities can open the eyes of doctors and psychiatrists and everybody to say, we've got to be more open-minded about the way that we think about things, and about we've got to get out of our own boxes. I mean, we ask one another, we ask our kids to be, flexible in their thinking. We ask one another to be flexible in their thinking. And so that advocacy that we have to have for, and those expectations that we have to have for our medical providers just we have to have that as well for them. And that's so challenging because they're doctors and we think they're supposed to know what they're doing.
Right. Right.
So you said that you weren't sure that had this been a quick blip, that you would have shared your, this experience, which I completely understand. And it's difficult as parents to know what's in and out of bounds to share about our children's experiences in their lives. How does your daughter feel about, talking about this, and what made you finally just open up and say, I've got to share this with the world?
Well, I feel like, I'm usually a pretty open person anyway.
Right.
And I think our situation was so kind of unusual in that it became so bad so quickly and then stayed that way for so long that I just had to, I mean, it wasn't like I could, say, oh, I mean, Kaylin wasn't at school,
Right.
She wasn't in the community anymore. She was at home, and then she was in the hospital. And so, in a way, I was forced to, but I guess I wasn't forced to be as honest as I was. But also, the funny thing about when you share is that you oftentimes, although you can get bombarded by opinions, you can also receive help and useful information. Mm-hmm. Oh, and going back to that, so the social media posts, I got a lot of information, and a lot of people concerned and supportive, but also started talking to Jessica Gavin with the Pray Kids, and she helped me. She called around to doctors, she's familiar with different doctors in the area. She called around the country, trying to find a place we could take Kaylin, once we got her out of the hospital, to try to, get some real help, to see, is this or is this not autoimmune autoimmune encephalitis, or is it PANS, or what is it? So, I think when you put it out there, sometimes you get back more than what you gave out.
Right.
And for us, it was really about surviving, and it still is to a degree. And now though, and then once you see your child suffer like that too, you start thinking about all the other children, and what about the ones that aren't receiving help or advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
and so it just becomes larger than yourself and your own situation.
It's sort of a beautiful place to start coming to a close in this conversation, and that is the vision of this If You Could See Me project is the idea that when we share, we give as much as we get, and we get as much as we give. And sometimes, it's one and sometimes it's the other, but not living in that isolated place, in that space where we think we're alone, is the best gift that we can give to ourselves and to one another. And you just perfectly illustrated why that is. I mean, other kids will probably get help because of what you have gone through, and how you have connected people and brought this out into the world in a bigger way than it was before. And your child got help because you spoke out, and people were able to step up and say, here's what I know. And I don't think that I can tell that story any better. We need each other, and thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. And I do want to say, it is hard and tiring to advocate for any patient, on behalf of them. But, I had psychiatrists telling me that maybe you should put Kaylin in residential bedding, for probably a year and a half or 2 years. And you just have to, if you know something's not right, you just have to keep struggling to fight. And because I can imagine, especially someone who's not, I'm educated, I have a husband who, pays the bills.
Right.
I pretty much made this my mission and focus every single second of every day while she was ill and there. So I can see how someone could easily slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
And end up in a place where they weren't received. Some people do need residential bedding. Again, I'm not saying that that's not the right spot for some patients.
Of course.
If it's the wrong treatment, how scary is that to it's not like giving up on somebody, but it felt that way to me.
Right.
Because I knew it wasn't the right thing to do.
And in so many cases, in any situation in which a medical doctor or a behavioral health provider, or when they are faced with certain things on a regular basis, it is an unfortunate truth that they become conditioned to think in a certain way about, this is what usually the answer is, so this is probably what the answer is in this case too.
Right.
And it is just so important for our mental health professionals to have an open mind, and to think a little bit differently, and not go down that rabbit hole that says that every case is the same and everybody needs the same thing. And it does make me very scared to think about the kids who don't have, a mom like you or a family like you, the kids who don't, not through any fault of anyone else, but they just simply do not have that support system, and they do end up getting the wrong treatment, and they end up losing, large swaths of their life, and they are, can be traumatized in various capacities. And so that is why, once again, it's just so important that we have these conversations, and that we hold our providers accountable.
Yes.
And we say, no, it's wrong, and I know it's wrong, and and that's just it. So kudos to you for doing that for your child, and no doubt for other children. Every time it happens, it's not just for that one kid. It's for, hopefully those doctors learn, and they see, and they open their minds to more possibility than what it usually looks like.
Yes.
So, Kim, you are just an inspiring, incredible lady. I could probably talk to you all day long. I really appreciate you giving your time and your energy, and all the work that you do is just so valued in our community. And congratulations on all of your success and on the health gains that you are making. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
Um, I no, I don't know. That's a good question.
That's a big question that just dropped in your lap, right?
Thank you for having these conversations about mental health, especially. And I would have to say, I think it's funny because I've got cancer. Kaylin's got PANS, and we started LWCC all within the last like 22 months, 23 months, and they all just seem to go together in a way in that, it's these unexpected things in life that you have to deal with. I think in your opening you said, or at some point you said something about how, you just have to respond,
right,
react to these things that you have no control over really. And so for me, they're all kind of linked together in a way. And I'm still processing all of it, of course, but I find that kind of interesting that, it's like I've been living in a surreal,
existence.
I don't know, a bad novel or something for the past few years. But it is all connected and in ways that I think I hadn't even realized yet. But I'm hoping that the next couple of years will be a little bit easier on me.
A little bit quieter would probably be nice.
I'm ready for boring.
I totally hear that. And I am wishing for you the most boring next 2 years that you can possibly imagine. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Oh, also, let's remind everybody to register and vote and get out there on November 6th and be a part of the Blue Wave.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for remembering to say that. That was my job. I totally forgot.
It's only because you're here. I wouldn't have remembered if it wasn't for you. So it's all good.
Okay.
Well,